All right, welcome to the John Wall Street Big Business on Campus podcast, powered by Playfly Sports and sponsored by Shorts Travel. We got an exciting show for you today. My colleague Corey Leff is here, but more exciting than Corey, which is tough to do, we have Robin Harris, the executive director of the Ivy League and leads as the commissioner of that great conference. So we have a really interesting discussion here that's going to give us a whole new perspective on a different part of college ecosystem today. So welcome, Robin. This is exciting for us. Thank you for joining us on our podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm really excited and looking forward to our conversation.
Likewise, I think that this conversation will be interesting to our audience just because of how much it over indexes with alum who went to a lot of these schools. So excited to have the conversation. I think a good place to start for us would be the house settlement, right? That's a huge difference between your conference and many, if not all, of the other conferences and guests that we've had on this podcast to date. The Ivy League chose not to participate in the house settlement framework. Maybe a good place to start is just asking what ultimately drove that decision for you guys.
So, for us to have opted into the benefits that are allowed under the House settlement would have required changes to longstanding Ivy League rules, starting with we don't provide athletic scholarships. And so we don't, and that is actually a bigger rule. We don't provide financial payments tied to athletics participation. So our student athletes, just like all students, receive need-based financial aid that is very generous, but it is based on economic need as determined by the financial aid office, completely independent of athletics talent and ability and status. And so for us to be able to provide those benefits in the house settlement, whether it's additional athletic scholarships, revenue sharing, or direct NIL payments, all would have required changes to Ivy League rules and philosophy and longstanding approach. So it was actually a fairly easy decision at every level of our process to ultimately decide we were not opting into the house settlement. And fundamental to that is we're still full-fledged Division One members. We still have student athletes participating in NCAA championships on a regular basis. And we can talk about our success nationally that continues even with us not opting into the house settlement.
This episode is brought to you by Shorts Sport Travel Logistics, the fastest growing leader in college athletics travel and the trusted choice of over 108 athletic departments nationwide. With their promise, Team Travel Made Easy, Shorts simplifies every aspect of team travel: air charters, commercial flights, buses, and hotels. By turning complex logistics into a competitive advantage, they've become the trusted choice for programs committed to winning on and off the field. Thank you for joining us on the Big Business on Campus, the college sports podcast powered by Playfly Sports.
I imagine there was some discussion, though, about, or at least concern about how you go about communicating your value proposition to recruits, right? You have other schools and other conferences that are offering them not just scholarship now, but direct NIL payments and others. I guess, how did that figure in, if at all? And have you guys seen any increased outbound transfer risk, tied to NIL?
It's really interesting as I talk with our coaches because when they are recruiting, and this is the longstanding recruiting approach, they're recruiting on the overall experience that student athletes receive in the Ivy League. So they get an amazing world-class education while also pursuing their athletic dreams and talents and participating in a sport they love, and they also have time to be real students and participate in other activities on campus. And it's a long-term decision because we are preparing them for their careers in whatever field they choose. And for some, it is in sports, including in the professional leagues on the quarter field. But for others, there's a multitude of careers that they're well positioned for by choosing our model. And that hasn't changed. So some families will continue to choose an athletics focused model. But for those that want a more balanced approach that really allows them to have the best of all worlds, we're still an amazing option for them.
Wonderful. So maybe let's help us understand, and really the audience understand, when you don't opt into the settlement, what does that expose you to? Is there different exposures now that you're exposed to that the opt-in schools are not?
I actually would flip it that we are remaining true to the role of intercollegiate athletics as part of a institution of higher education. And I realized in the first question, the other question you asked me about transfers, and we are looking at our transfer rates. And for undergraduate transfers across the league, we are seeing on average, if you averaged it out across the 8 schools, fewer than 5 per school
Hmm.
each year on average. And at the graduate level, we do see more because they are able to compete elsewhere as graduate students. For us, athletics competition is for undergraduates, so they are not able to compete in the Ivy League once they graduate. And so for us, it wasn't really about the risk, it was about the commitment to having a model where athletes participate because they want to participate, not because they have to. So if a student athlete receiving need-based financial aid decides not to participate anymore, they still receive their need-based financial aid. It's not tied to their athletics participation.
We've spent a lot of time on this podcast talking about the need to generate incremental revenues because the costs have gone up dramatically for college athletic departments. How does the Ivy League's financial aid only participation model alter the economics of your school's P&Ls versus those in the Power Four that now face these 20.5 million plus in rev share and in other expenses?
So our schools sponsor on average 35 sports and have reasonable budgets to support those sports. It it is not a profit making venture, to say the least, for our schools. We are doing it because we believe in the value of intercollegiate athletics for the student athletes' well being and growth and potential. And so the fact that our athletic departments aren't also trying to raise $20.5 million to fund the revenue sharing and NIL or additional athletic scholarship is, we're not really impacted by what you're seeing elsewhere, where there is this pressure to generate more and more revenue. We have always operated a wide number of sports in a very cost effective manner. And so that's not changing for us with the House settlement.
Are there pressures? You mentioned your athletic department operates as a cost center. Is that acceptable, or will that continue to be accepted long term? Are there pressures, whether that be political or from alumni, for Ivy League schools to move closer to a P4 model and generate profits?
We don't have that pressure, certainly not from the presidents who really view, and athletic directors view athletics as an extracurricular or even co-curricular activity where it is funded by our schools, similar to how they fund the drama program or the music program or the arts program, that it's an important component of the overall fabric of the campus community and the student experience. And so it is something that should be funded. Now, our athletic directors are amazing fundraisers, and we have very generous alumni that contribute to athletics programs, just like they contribute to other aspects of our campus operations.
Men's basketball is kind of the Ivy League's biggest national stage. Is there any argument for making men's basketball specifically to pursue that sport economically more aggressively?
Well, while we care about finances, we don't make decisions based on generating revenue. Never have. And I would say right now, women's basketball has had multiple bids to the NCAA tournament the past couple of years, and we're positioning ourselves to be able to do so again. And we've had actually 8 multiple bids in the NCAA postseason last year and 8 national championships. So, yes, basketball is a very prominent sport for us, but the way we have always approached athletics is caring for all the sports. And it's a really hard balance sometimes when there are sports that garner more attention, but we really do focus on sports that also don't get the public attention because the experience of the student athletes is equally as important. Now, it can be easier to garner more attention and convey our messaging through the sports that are more popular. So when Princeton men's basketball, most recently Cornell, before them, go to the Sweet 16, that's an amazing platform for us to show how student athletes who are real students are able to achieve and to promote our model in a way that we can't do even when we win a national championship in some other sports. Although men's lacrosse last year, Cornell won a national championship, beating a couple of Big Ten teams. So, that was a big moment as well. And we had two teams in the field hockey Final Four just this fall, which is an important achievement for those programs and the Ivy League too.
That Princeton run that you're referencing was not nearly as fun for me. And as an Arizona alum, their first round win was over a highly ranked Arizona team. Sorry, Mike.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's interesting when you think about it from the perspective of not focusing on profit as a driver. Does that mean that there's significant revenue upside that hasn't been tapped yet? Not that that's a negative, right? Not being revenues and revenue is a bad thing, but revenue hasn't been focused on as much because of that. Does that mean that there's a significant sort of untapped, undervalued element to the Ivy League at the moment?
Absolutely. We are an untapped potential revenue source for the right partners. And as I was thinking about the conversation we were going to have and thinking about what types of questions would you ask me, I was actually thinking about this, that I don't want to call us undervalued because I think we're highly valued, but I think untapped, undertapped
Under
is the right
monetized.
framing.
Yeah,
Yes,
right. Your
undermonetized.
commercial rights are undervalued. Maybe is more of the. But how do you? So what are they? So what would you say? Right. What are the things that you think? If you were to pick a few of the top things that you would say, hey, we should really focus on driving X, Y, and Z, which would be new revenue buckets or bigger revenue buckets for the league.
But we have a sponsorship agency in JMI Sports, and they've been a terrific partner for league-wide properties. They work with three of our schools. Our schools all have their own MMR agencies as well. And so we do have sponsor support. So I don't want to undervalue that either. I think it should be more, candidly. And I think the value of our tournaments across all our sports and the quality of play first of all, but the also the those who are watching are of a level that sponsors should be paying to attract and to promote their business to. And with that said, though, sometimes what sponsors want are assets we're not able to provide them. And that goes into the fact that we are not simply, we're not focused on revenue generation, right?
Right.
So we're not providing lists of alumni contact
Mm-hmm.
information to sponsors. That's not
Mm-hmm.
something we have access to, nor would we provide, for example.
Right. Got it. So, all right. So potentially more sponsorship revenue. What
Mhm.
about when it comes to the game day experience and ticketing and premium? Right, with such an affluent alumni base that you have to pull from, it's really interesting to think about those sort of amazing experiences that people can have while they're watching a game and really up leveling that. Have you focused on that throughout the conference or at the conference level itself?
We have talked about it some for some of our tournaments. For example, the basketball tournaments, we've implemented courtside seating and hospitality. We did at one point for our lacrosse tournament have sponsored hospitality as well to have that be a premier space. And our athletic directors, to their credit, are prioritizing attendance and encouraging our fans to come and not pricing the tickets or even the experiences at a point that would deter the attendance. And so while we provide those experiences in some events, it's not a big revenue driver, candidly, for us. But could it be? Absolutely. And then as far as our venues themselves during the regular season, um, because we've been participating in sports for a long time, we have a lot of iconic venues, and they don't necessarily have the same spaces that
Right.
other football stadiums, in particular, and also basketball and even hockey arenas might have.
Yeah, it's interesting. What we've seen with schools that have similar makeups as your league is that you can really bifurcate sort of ticketing, where you're making a majority of the tickets accessible to the community, and then you're having super high end premium experiences that have really high quality food and other elements to them that are at a really high ticket price and experience price. So you end up having, both in those experiences. So that's something that could be an interesting thought pattern for the Ivy League. I'm not sure how much you guys have thought about that, those types of bifurcations of experiences to really bring in both the community and sort of the interested, more affluent alumni.
And we've also talked about how do we promote our stories and our messaging and our fabulous successes across a variety of sports um, and themes. And can we do that by having sort of the documentaries, broadcast documentaries that again provide an opportunity for a sponsor to jump in and really we would benefit by promoting the story, which is what we're trying to focus on, but there could be a monetary upside as well. We looked into doing that. I think it was 2 years ago. We were celebrating our last year our 50th anniversary of women's championships. We're the first Division One conference to celebrate that milestone of sponsoring 50 years of women's championships. And we were trying to fund something that we could broadcast. We had opportunities for broadcast distribution, but the funding was something we weren't able to secure. And I think that's an undertapped opportunity.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Actually, the producers of this podcast, Sport and Story, I'll give them a little plug. They do that. They go and produce documentaries. They even produce storytelling newsletters for a ton of college athletic departments too. So they could be an
We
interesting
should talk. We should
yeah.
talk.
Yeah, definitely. I'll get you guys connected, but content's interesting. Awareness is interesting. Let's talk about that from a media rights standpoint, and what how do you think about that from the Ivy League perspective? And it's such a different view coming from your conference than perhaps the media deals we're hearing coming out of the Big Ten or the SEC, et cetera. I'd be interested in your perspective on media rights and the evolution for the Ivy League.
That's been such an incredibly rewarding process for me and to see the development and growth as we were incredibly well positioned when ESPN was about to launch ESPN Plus, in that we had been digitally producing and broadcasting over 1,100 events a year across our 8 schools at a time where ESPN was looking for that level of content to help launch Plus. In addition, for our schools to be able to distribute all those events, it was behind a paywall. So we had the proof of concept for ESPN that our alumni would pay to watch and families would pay to watch the various sports. And when we signed with ESPN, and it's still true, the price for Plus was lower than what uh, people had to pay for subscription to the old Ivy League digital network. So, because we had that digital content that ESPN really needed, we were able to expand the linear exposure compared to what we had had previously. So, we had for many years had football broadcasts and occasionally would have some regular season basketball. And we were talking with ESPN about the basketball tournament. They were producing the men's lacrosse tournament. But through the negotiations, we were able to add to the number of sports that are broadcast throughout the year on ESPN Linear and really develop a terrific 10-year partnership with them that has just been a win-win all around and has done so much for our league and the fact that people that want to watch an Ivy League event now know exactly where to go to, and it's easy to find is huge. And there had been concerns initially we'd be lost in a big platform, and the opposite has been true. It's so easy to find our events.
So, as you think about your next rights deal, is discoverability driving it? How do you weigh discoverability versus reach, and obviously the finances that go into it as well when
Yeah.
evaluating your distribution partners or potential distribution partners?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we are just beginning those conversations. We have several years till we're in the phase where we would be first talking with ESPN as the rights holder and then potentially go into market. But we are having those conversations because it's really a completely, for the most part, different group of athletic directors. So we need to hear from them. What are their priorities today? When we were entering this, I guess 7 years ago, we had a list of priorities and we hit them all to varying degree. And so we need to get those priorities and then see what we can match as we go through these negotiations. But it will not surprise you. We do receive some rights fee. It's not what you're reading about when you read about the other conferences. And it helps to offset the costs that our schools are incurring into broadcast. Now it's, I think, almost 1,400 events a year that we're broadcasting digitally. So the rights fee helps to offset that partially. And we would like to see that grow, but that's not it's probably not good negotiations for me to say, but that's not going to be the driver. We're going to want other components of the deal as well that may be rated more highly for our athletic directors.
Is that getting at the storytelling you were referencing?
Possibly, and the exposure, and the last time we insisted that if our schools were willing to promote to broadcast an event, that it would be available on Plus. And we want to make sure that continues because we produce a lot of events and we don't want to have a tiered approach.
And
What about international? Mike had talked about untapped revenue potential. Is there untapped international value in the Ivy League brand as global interest grows, both in U.S. sport, but obviously higher education as well?
Yeah, that's a excellent question, and something from time to time we've looked into, and particularly when the Pac-12 was sponsoring events as a conference in
In
Asia,
Asia?
and
Yep.
we had teams participate in the events, and I went to scout. I will say the Pac-12 did a great job. They had more staff members, full-time staff members working the event than we have total. So understanding what is involved in putting on events internationally was something that was good for me to learn. But our brand internationally is the best in the country as a league. The Ivy League brand really means something. We actually have trademark counsel because we are protecting our mark both domestically and internationally because of the cachet and the stature that we've invested in it, but also that others want to tap into sometimes in infringing manners. So I've absolutely learned about the international uh, value and aspects. It's very complicated to figure out how we would manage that, but we have looked at it from time to time.
what
And
about
if
And
my
we
like
had
memory
an, I'm
if
sorry,
my
we
memory
had an,
serves me correct, sorry, I was just going to say, if my memory
yeah.
serves me correct, that trip to China was the time LeAngelo Ball got in trouble for shoplifting. Perhaps is that accurate?
That was not a year that an Ivy team was there. We were before and after that.
all right, nice, good.
But I
So when you
stayed
think
at the
about
hotel where they were.
there you go, there you go. This episode is brought to you by Shorts Sport Travel Logistics, the fastest growing leader in college athletics travel and the trusted choice of over 108 athletic departments nationwide. With their promise, Team Travel Made Easy, Shorts simplifies every aspect of team travel: air charters, commercial flights, buses, and hotels. By turning complex logistics into a competitive advantage, they've become the trusted choice for programs committed to winning on and off the field. Thank you for joining us on the Big Business on Campus, the college sports podcast powered by Playfly Sports. When you think about that, whether it's international or just expanding the brand, how do you think about digital platforms and using them to really push, because we this is really focused on the business of college sports, and we want to thinking about how you expand your brand, and maybe even putting free games and access, but really using digital platforms to capture that community, more storytelling, using services like some of the bigger players in college sports, like WMT, who builds, the websites and the platforms for the big schools, etc. And thinking about that to drive more, connectivity to your fan bases.
Yeah, we need to do more internationally. And we have a, a staff of 12, and we have more people working in communications, which is the space, than any other department. But even that is only four people managing 34 Ivy League sports.
Mhm.
And so we do need to figure that out, but that's a heavy lift. Our events digitally are available internationally. We have a provider because ESPN is not available in most countries, still outside the US. So we do have a provider that those who want to watch from Europe or elsewhere are able to do so. And of course, our website, I do look at it, I wonder where websites are going these days. As social is, it's social the way to tap in. And we do make really good use of our social platforms and promoting the competitive success of the Ivy League. But for the type of content you're talking about, that's another untapped resource, I would say.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, to follow up on that
Yeah.
as well. Yeah, definitely.
Robin, the schools in your conference don't have NIL collectives, but the athletes at your schools gain access to like these elite networks, these elite alumni networks, and internships and resume signaling. Is that an unspoken advantage that the league one markets, or and so if that's the case, I guess it wouldn't be unspoken. But is it something at a league level you guys are comfortable with? In the sense that you don't pay your athletes, but we know that this is kind of how they're getting rewarded.
So it's first of all, we do allow legitimate real NIL activity for our student athletes. And what we don't allow is pay for play or fake NIL, which is what's happening outside for the most part, the Ivy League. And related to that, yes, I mean, connections for employment and careers and internships is absolutely a benefit of coming to the Ivy League, because there are alumni that have preceded the current students who understand what it takes to be an Ivy League student athlete, and the time management skills and the leadership skills and the resilience, and all while balancing real academic work at a very high level while competing at an equally high level, is something that I think, whether you're an Ivy League alumni or not, there are businesses that value that experience. And then, of course, there are connections because of our alumni. And that's been true for decades, that student athletes do have that opportunity to make the connections and hopefully get in summer internships and jobs that then set them up for careers post graduation. And related to that, we don't allow required workouts and practices during the summer, because our student athletes should be getting life experience and internships and jobs.
On the student athlete side, where do you think we're going here with collective bargaining and athletes as employees? What's your projection and thoughts there?
That is $1 million question. So I firmly believe, as does the Ivy League, that student athletes are not employees. It's, as we've been talking about, the way we operate, it's an extracurricular activity. It's part of their overall educational experience, and we are conducting athletics primarily for their benefit. Candidly, I mean, of course, there's community and we enjoy it, but it's really for the benefit of the student athletes. It's not an employer-employee relationship. They keep their aid whether or not they're on the team, right? If they get need-based financial aid. So I just start like, that's a hard line, that we don't believe student athletes are employees, and we don't operate in that way. So it's really hard for me to understand, and I know this has become a common theme by some, how you have collective bargaining and how you get to an agreement and not have it be some sort of employer employee relationship. But maybe there's a way to do that. I'm open-minded to considering that. And once you get past that threshold, how do you classify the groups that are bargaining? You have
Mm,
so many different sports, you have so many different levels, and probably different needs. Who's the bargaining unit? I know that athletes.org has stepped out. I think they're the first one. And I appreciate the thoughtfulness that they've put into this. I still have so many questions about how this could possibly work. And I really am trying to think through it in a very futuristic, open way because, but I fail to see when you think of the volume. We have 8,000 student athletes in the Ivy League.
mm,
And what is the NCAA? NCAA has 500,000, right, across all three divisions. So there's over 150-ish thousand maybe in Division One. I'm guessing on these numbers. How do you manage that?
right. Well,
Well,
that's the
Robin, if we get to a world, sorry, Mike, if we get to a world where athletes are deemed employees, student athletes are deemed employees, how exposed is the Ivy League relative to the conferences that are, currently have these guys and females on scholarship?
Yeah, I don't even know how that works. I can't even imagine how does that work because then um, we'd have to really look at what's varsity athletics if some, and I don't know when that, if it's a court that says they're employees and they have to be paid a minimum wage for practice time. I'm just don't think you'll see the sports that we have, if any, at that point in time. And I know others have said that, but I think that's a very likely outcome. And I think that would be truly unfortunate.
It would
do you
become club then, is what you're suggesting.
Yes. But even then,
yeah,
if you look at the analysis that's going on, I'm not sure there's a differential there. I don't know how you decide that. Um, I think and why is the drama program then also not employees or
yeah.
so?
Well, Mike and I aren't lawyers, and we're not going to negotiate one way or the other.
You start you start to think through, does it bifurcate, do we bifurcate different types of Division One programs at some point, right? And this is sort of going back to the way we started this conversation, which was opting in to the settlement or not. Do we start to think that we're going to have bifurcation if there is a category of employees, athletes as employees, or some other elements here? Do we start bifurcating what it means to be NCAA Division One? There's multiple categories. Does that maybe happen? And then secondarily, be interested on your thoughts, because part of this sort of Super League concept to drive these bigger media deals with the bigger programs, potentially separating, or at least football separating in some way, to have their own media rights deals. Um, how does that impact a league like the Ivy League as well? So I'd just be interested in both sort of the bifurcation of Division One, if necessary, and sort of the Super League concepts and how you think about those, if at all.
We do think about them, and I'll give you a very lawyerly answer since I'm a lawyer by training. It depends on the circumstances, but I will say this: we're used to being different and we're comfortable with who we are and how we approach college athletics. And so, as long as we can continue to compete and provide the best experience possible to our student athletes, we're comfortable. So, if other conferences want to have an employer employee relationship as the next step in the ladder that they're already climbing, as long as we can compete, we're comfortable with that because we do well and we have an experience that's going to still be attractive to families who are going to want to experience Ivy League athletics. At what point does it get to too different where we're just not comfortable? That's where there's an issue. But I don't know what that would look like or where that would be. And there's a split coming at some point, right? We all know that, but when is it? Division One's probably too big now and it keeps growing. So what does that look like and where does it split apart? And that's the biggest question. And we do spend time talking about that because our campuses are all about excellence in everything that we do. And that includes athletics. And so we have coaches and students and families that choose our model because of the opportunity to excel academically and athletically. And so we want to be able to maintain that. And depending on what happens, is it 5 years down the road? Is it, it's when the media contracts start to expire, right?
Mhm.
That's when things will open up. And so we're having those conversations to plan for that, but I don't have all the answers by any means. And
I
if
know we're
anyone
starting to
tells
get
you
up.
they do, they're lying. They're lying.
Mhm.
I know we're starting to get up against it, but I do need to ask before we go: is uh, we've seen this constant change over the last couple of years. Do you see the league being more durable today because it has stayed true to its kind of roots, or is it become more vulnerable with all this change?
I feel personally that we are the best equipped league to survive this incredible time of uncertainty and really potentially existential change because we know who we are, because we have a common philosophy and approach, because we understand the where athletics fits in the overall student experience, and because we provide something that, as I said, athletes, students, their families will continue to choose. I actually think we're well equipped to survive this compared to any other league.
Hmm. One thing that's really hot as a topic right now, especially as we talk about big business on campus, is mixed use and development. How do you look at that from your perspective and the league? Is it you have some really interesting campuses, a lot of them in urban locations, and really interesting opportunities for development, right? As a way to generate more revenue back to either the school itself or the athletic departments. But is that something that the Ivy League is shies away from, is leaning into, or it's just case by case?
That would be a campus by campus decision. It would depend on the land around the campus that they have. What I have seen in my time frame is as campuses develop new facilities, they're often cutting edge academic facilities at the forefront of science and technology. Also, dorms, upgrading dorms because our campuses are centuries old. So the constant need to upgrade and update. And of course, new athletic facilities. I haven't seen as much yet the mixed use development that you're talking about. Some of it is the urban nature of some of our campuses, but even where they are in a less urban environment, then they have a town relationship there as well. So I don't know. It's a really good question, though.
Sounds good. All right, Cord, do you want to hit the last question, your next decade
Yeah,
question?
I mean, I think as we look out, and you talked about the early 2030s when these media contracts come up. 10 years from now, we get to 2035. What is success for the Ivy League at that point? Is it just still existing? Is it still winning championships? I mean, what does success look like for you guys?
Yeah, I think it's still being what I would call one of the power conferences because we are the fifth best conference in Division One. When you look at the all sport metrics across all sports and our Olympic success. And that is, I would, if 10 years from now we are still thriving at the top level of college athletics, providing outstanding, legitimate, and real experiences to student athletes across are over 35 sports. I think that would be a huge success and what I expect to see.
One thing I've just been always been thinking about. I see Texas Tech and Cody Campbell coming in, and in one year the football program is able to compete for a national championship. The Ivy League schools have, some of the most affluent alumni bases in the world. Is there any scenario where we get to where pay to play exists and you could see Harvard, winning a football national championship or basketball national championship again?
I really don't see that. I never say never, but I really don't see that. We have zero conversations about that at any level of our decision making structure.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I love ending on that because you got to because it's great advice not only for a conference but for all our listeners as individuals. Remember who you are. Stick to who you are. It will lead you in the right direction. And I think that message for the Ivy League and Robin is a great message, because I think I think you're right. That's going to make you the most sustainable and one of the most sustainable groups in the ecosystem. So really interesting conversation here. Thank you for joining us. This is a totally different perspective than we've heard on this podcast to date, and I think it really rounds out a good discussion around what's happening in all the different parts of college sports. So this was really enlightening for me, hopefully for our audience as well. So I just want to say thank you, and appreciate you being on the John Wall Street Big Business on Campus podcast, powered by Playfly Sports and sponsored by Shorts Travel. Excited to have you on, Robin. So thanks for joining us again. We've got Robin Harris, Executive Director of the Ivy League. So thanks again. Appreciate it, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed the conversation as I thought I would.
Awesome.
Thanks, Robin.